On this Saturday night, new threats from the U.S. president. Donald Trump says he's pulling thousands of troops out of Germany after its chancellor slams the war with Iran.
The Americans clearly have no strategy.
While the U.S. threatens new sanctions over the Strait of Hormuz without a plan for peace. Another economic casualty of the conflict.
The nail that hit the coffin pretty quickly was fuel over the last 60 days.
Discount airline Spirit ceases operations, leaving customers on both sides of the border scrambling. A rally for a tragic anniversary. 1 year since little Jack and Lilly Sullivan disappeared from their Nova Scotia home. And not a question of if, but when BC will lose glaciers and the dangerous downstream ripple effects.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The world's largest and most powerful military alliances appear to be under threat tonight after the U.S. president ordered the removal of 5,000 troops from Germany. NATO is demanding answers and calling for details surrounding Donald Trump's decision. The president has also suggested pulling troops out of Italy and Spain. Trump's move appears to stem from criticism of the ongoing war in Iran by Germany's chancellor. Last night, Trump said the U.S. may be, quote, better off not making a deal with the Iranian regime. And today, the U.S. warned shipping companies could face tough sanctions if they pay a toll imposed by Tehran to safely pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Tonight, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney is on his way to Armenia to meet with European leaders as tensions grow. Mackenzie Gray has our top story tonight.
Since the end of the Second World War, American troops have been a fixture in Germany. But Donald Trump is promising to partially roll back that decades-long commitment after a spat with the German Chancellor.
He criticized me for doing the whole thing with Iran. But I said, would you like to have a nuclear weapon in the hands of Iran? He said, no, I don't. I said, well, then I guess I'm right.
That disagreement leading the Trump administration to say they're pulling 5,000 U.S. troops from Germany, who currently host more than 36,000 Americans, by far the biggest contingent in Europe.
Die Amerikaner haben offensichtlich keine Strategie.
German leader Friedrich Merz had been critical of Trump, saying the Americans clearly have no strategy with the war in Iran. And the problem with conflicts like this is always that you don't have to just go in, you also have to get out again. Adding Iranian leadership has humiliated the U.S. That sent Trump off with a flurry of online posts about Germany and public insults.
He's doing a terrible job. He's got immigration problems. He's got energy problems. He's got problems of all kinds.
NATO saying they're working with the Americans to understand the details of the troop reduction. The German defense minister trying to play this down, saying it was foreseeable, adding that the continued presence of U.S. soldiers in Germany and in Europe is good for all three parties. Germany, not the only ally to be critical of the war in Iran, that looks like it may restart, with the Iranian deputy foreign minister saying it's up to the U.S. if they want to end the war. Trump's reply, he can't agree to the latest Iranian peace proposal, putting into question the ceasefire, which looks to not have held between Israel and Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon, as both sides continue to attack each other. Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon killing 41 people in 24 hours. Wars in the Middle East, the U.S. pulling back from Europe, and Trump constantly insulting allies, leading the president of Poland to warn NATO is disintegrating. We must all do what it takes to reverse this disastrous trend. But the upside for Donald Tusk is U.S. troops won't be removed from Germany for at least 6 to 12 months. Plenty of time for Trump to reverse course, as he often does. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Ottawa.
As mentioned, Prime Minister Mark Carney has embarked on another overseas trip to strengthen Canada's ties with its international allies. This time, Carney is headed to the European Political Community Summit in Armenia, marking the first time a non-European leader will be at the meeting. Deepening trade and security relations with European countries will be at the top of the agenda, including advancing support for Ukraine as Russia's invasion continues. Cuba is responding to new U.S. sanctions against its government. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel said the new measures reinforce Washington's, quote, brutal genocidal blockade against the island nation. Trump signed an executive order Friday broadening sanctions against Cuba's government, targeting people and entities supporting Cuba's security apparatus or those who are complicit in corruption or serious human rights violations. Trump's order also accused Cuba of aligning itself with Iran and militant groups, including Hezbollah. Iran's chokehold in the Strait of Hormuz has led to soaring costs for gas and jet fuel, and now thousands of passengers in the U.S. and Canada are scrambling to make travel arrangements after budget carrier Spirit Airlines ceased operations this morning. As Candace Cole reports, customers say they were left not knowing what to do or where to turn.
What are we going to do?
Thousands of Spirit customers left stranded and frustrated after the airline announced it's grounded for good. This after the ultra-low-cost carrier failed to secure a $500 million government bailout Thursday after a week of signaling from U.S. President Donald Trump of a possible bailout. 3 a.m. Saturday morning, Spirit Airlines said in a statement it's conducting an orderly wind down of operations effective immediately, advising passengers not to go to the airport because all flights have been canceled.
This morning when we got here, there was like, oh, we canceled all the flights because the Spirit's shutting down.
First they told us that they were going to give us hotels, Uber, and food vouchers, but then they canceled and said that they couldn't give it to us.
The nail that hit the coffin pretty quickly was fuel over the last 60 days, 75 days, where that was, as we say in the business, one hurdle too many.
Jet fuel prices have doubled in the 2 months the Strait of Hormuz has been closed, cutting off a fifth of the world's oil exports due to the U.S. and Israel's war on Iran. And with no end in sight to the war, it could spell trouble for other airlines.
We're not done. I think that there are a number of other carriers globally, not just North America, not just the U.S., globally, that will be in trouble for the next few months as a result of what's going on in the Middle East.
Spirit's sudden closure is being felt by Canadian travelers as well, with many living near airports just over the border in places like Detroit, Niagara Falls, and Plattsburgh, catching cheap flights to Florida and other destinations. Now, United Airlines is stepping in, offering to hire some of Spirit's 17,000 employees and helping ease the pain of passengers.
We actually have a dedicated website that they can go to rebook themselves on United, and we have capped fares for them, anywhere from $199 to $299.
Spirit says it will automatically process refunds for flights purchased directly through them with a credit or debit card. They say compensation for other means of payment will be determined later through their bankruptcy proceedings. Candace Cole, Global News, Washington.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford delivered a commencement speech at a U.S. university in Michigan today, touching on the close ties between Canadians and Americans and the risk imposed by Trump's tariffs.
Our success, our prosperity is not an accident. It's the result of more than 200 years of work on both sides of the border.
Ford has been one of the loudest voices against U.S. tariffs and Trump's repeated taunts. He was south of the border to receive a doctorate of humane letters from Saginaw Valley State University. Ford used his time on stage to tell the hundreds of graduates about his years living and working in the U.S. and the historic relationship that's been undermined by the U.S. administration. In Nova Scotia, it's now been 1 year since 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were first reported missing from their home in Pictou County. Despite several lengthy search efforts, little evidence surrounding their disappearance has been found. Now, as Mitchell Bailey reports, community members are demanding more in their push for answers.
It's been 1 year, and community members here in Stellarton are still wondering what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Family, friends, and members of the public rallied outside their local RCMP detachment on Saturday.
We're here to mark 1 year of not having answers. 1 year of there's still so many questions.
Lilly and Jack were 6 and 4 years old when they were first reported missing from their home in Lansdowne Station on May 2nd, 2025. It was reported to police at the time the siblings wandered away from their property, but despite extensive search efforts in the surrounding area, there has been no signs of the children.
Lilly and Jack are two beautiful children that should be running around right now. They should be playing right now.
The rally organizer says the investigation needs a clearer direction.
The public is no further ahead today, other than speculation, of what we should be helping with.
Since Lilly and Jack's disappearance, the RCMP said they've received and are in the process of evaluating nearly 1,200 tips.
We continue to ask anyone who has specific fact-based information that could assist the investigation to come forward.
Investigators have interviewed more than 100 people, administered polygraphs, and reviewed more than 8,000 video files related to the case. Police maintain there's no evidence the children were abducted, continuing to label it as a missing persons case. This woman says she drove all the way from Toronto to offer support.
I've driven through various parts of Ontario, mostly border cities, putting up flyers. On my way out here, obviously just stopping at the truck stops, putting up posters. Just any kind of advocacy, any kind of awareness as a mom. It touches. You want the kids found. You want to make sure they're safe.
At the rally, RCMP said their commitment to Lilly and Jack has not wavered, as this community pledges to be the driving force behind keeping these two missing children top of mind for everyone. Colleen?
Mitchell Bailey in Stellarton, Nova Scotia. Thanks, Mitchell. Destroying usable, decommissioned RCMP vehicles. Coming up, why critics say there's no proof that costly precaution is keeping Canadians safe. The federal government has resumed auctioning some decommissioned RCMP vehicles after a global news story last year revealed thousands of them, many with low mileage, were being crushed into scrap. Well, Public Safety Canada says it's to prevent another tragedy like the 2020 Portapique killings in Nova Scotia when a gunman posed as a police officer. But as Melissa Ridgen reports, there's little evidence to suggest destroying usable vehicles is protecting the public.
This storage facility in Winnipeg is one of dozens across Canada, stacked row upon row with RCMP vehicles destined to be crushed, some with as little as 30,000 kilometers on them. Public Safety Canada made the decision in response to a Nova Scotia man killing 22 people while dressed as a police officer in a replica cruiser back in 2020. Before that, decommissioned vehicles were sold, generating around $8 million a year for the RCMP. Since then, it's costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to store and crush usable vehicles. Global News first reported this last February, and since then, Ottawa has partially lifted the ban, allowing ATVs, snow machines, and boats to be sold, but sedans, SUVs, trucks, and vans are still being turned into scrap. The RCMP told Ottawa it's a headache to manage the decommissioned fleet, and there's no proof the ban improves public safety.
Despite the public safety department being told that there really isn't a way that this is actually reducing crime, making the public more safe, it's this purely a measure that isn't having a helpful impact on taxpayers.
Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangari isn't budging.
The issue in question is rooted from recommendations from the Mass Casualty Commission.
That inquiry in the wake of the Nova Scotia mass shooting recommended keeping police paraphernalia out of the public's hands. But with police decals just a click away and other Canadian police services still selling their used cars, critics see no point. This crime prevention expert sides with the government, sort of.
The Mass Casualty Commission is a very important commission and did a very thorough job, and that we generally need to be implementing all of their recommendations.
But he says banning the sale of cop cars is just one of 130 recommendations and not the one that would measurably keep Canadians safe. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Ahead, BC's disappearing glaciers and the long-term ecological implications.
Uy, grabe ang ashfall.
Huge, thick clouds of ash erupting from Mayon volcano in the Philippines, prompting warnings for dozens of communities in the surrounding region. Residents are being advised to stay indoors, wear masks, and avoid designated danger zones as the active volcano spews hazardous debris. A far cry from the clear view of a picture-perfect cone Mayon is famous for. With increased seismic activity in recent days, officials are closely monitoring the situation. This weekend, BC is facing unseasonably high temperatures. Watering restrictions are already in place in several regions ahead of what's expected to be a hot, dry summer. And with climate change, new research shows BC's glaciers are disappearing at an alarming rate. As meteorologist Christy Gordon explains, it's raising concerns about the long-term impact on water supply and ecosystems.
Western Canada is
in many ways right in the bullseye of the rapid accelerated loss that we're seeing for many mountain glaciers on planet Earth.
Professor Brian Menounos studies glaciers across Western Canada, and what his team found shocked them.
The amount of water being lost in the first decade of the 21st century was on the order of about 7 to 8 gigatons per year.
Then, during the next decade, that number doubled. Then it more than doubled again. In 2023, BC's glaciers had a record ice loss of 40 gigatons of water. To make matters worse, glaciers are becoming darker. Normally, when it's cooler, most of the glacier is covered by fresh white snow. This acts like a protective blanket by reflecting the sun's solar radiation, keeping the ice below cool. But as our atmosphere warms, there's less snow, and the ice below is exposed and melts even faster.
But what we're also finding is that the frequency and the severity of wildfires has increased. That soot and ash can deposit on the glacier, thereby darkening those surfaces and thereby accelerating melt.
Even if temperatures stopped rising tomorrow, Menounos' research shows they would continue shrinking. About 40% of BC's glaciers would be gone.
Already committed to the fate of many of our smaller glaciers. They are in what's called disequilibrium, or strongly out of balance with climate.
Why does this matter? Because they protect ecosystems by storing water and releasing it in late summer when they need it most. And retreating glaciers can remove slope support and increase the risk of rock slides. And as BC's glaciers disappear, all of that water will eventually end up in our oceans.
Perhaps BC is only representing 2 millimeters. But when we look at all the other mountains and we put that together, it has, for the last number of years, been the second most important source of sea level rise, melting glaciers worldwide.
Christy Gordon, Global News.
A young humpback whale that's been stranded off the coast of Germany since March has been released into the North Sea. The whale, nicknamed Timmy by local media, drew national interest after it repeatedly became stuck in shallow waters near the coastal city of Wismar. The rescue effort, which was funded by 2 German millionaires, saw the calf transported by a water-filled barge, then released into the open sea. The rescue operation has been criticized by some marine experts who say the calf's chance of survival is low. Next, a leg up for athletes. What those in Canadian sports say a major funding boost will do. The future of Canadian sport got a major shot in the arm this week with the announcement of hundreds of millions of dollars in new federal funding. For years, there have been calls to boost Canadian investment in sport. Heidi Petracek explains what the move could mean for athletes of all ages.
Go, Canada, go! Canadian athletes say for too long, increasing costs and chronic underfunding forced many to make a choice: take on the financial burdens of expensive training and equipment, or walk away.
Athletes who were in Milano Cortina, they were spending on average $25,000 per person just to be participants on the national team. And that meant that most of them weren't even getting, the training camps, the coaching, the access that they needed to be there.
Now there's hope that will change. The federal government's spring economic update has promised $755 million over 5 years to boost national sports organizations, develop elite athletes, and pump up participation among all Canadians.
With this financial announcement of sport funding, that pressure gets taken off the backs of our athletes, our coaches, and our sports systems.
A good investment in sport supports high performance. It supports gold medal ambition. It also supports free swimming lessons for kids in Granville Island.
We need an increase in our core funding. It hasn't changed since 2005.
The National Olympic Committee blasted Ottawa earlier this year for its failure to invest after Team Canada marked its lowest medal count in more than 2 decades at the 2026 Winter Olympics. Now the CEO feels government is finally listening.
Time will tell if it's enough, but this is a generational investment.
The funding will go where sports excellence begins, to the more than 60 national sports organizations that foster the next generation of competitors. And the money also includes $20 million to ensure sport is safe and healthy for all.
I think this is the first time a Canadian government hasn't just talked about the important link between playground to podium in Canadian sport, but has actually invested behind it and has a strategy about how those two things must be interconnected.
Olympic medalist Jennifer Heil says what's needed now is a transformation of the country's entire sport environment.
This should be one system. Right now it's piecemealed together, but there's no reason why it can't be one system, and that's where we're going to thrive.
Whether that means more Olympic medals or just more kids hitting the courts, both would be considered a win. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Colleen Christie. For tonight's Your Canada, we're turning back the clock a few decades as Vancouver marks a special anniversary.
Expo rules!
40 years ago today, Expo 86 kicked off, drawing 22 million visitors from across the country and around the world over the course of the exposition. The World's Fair saw the likes of then Prince Charles and Princess Diana attend the festivities. Expo 86 is credited with helping to dramatically transform Vancouver's image and infrastructure to make it the internationally recognized city it is today. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.